Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm back to do another Friday Reads where I talk about the books that I've read over the course of the past week. So yeah, let's just jump into it. I have read all mysteries this week, which I did kind of an accident. So if you are a fan of mystery books, stick around. I have a few different kinds to talk to you about. The first one is Murder at the Grand Raj Palace by Vaseem Khan. This is the fourth book in the Baby Ganesh series. I mentioned this one briefly last week. This is basically a cozy mystery series, although it doesn't feel like super cozy to me. It's just cozy in the sense that it's not like super gritty in my opinion. These books are set in Mumbai, India, and you are following this man named Inspector Chopra, who was a former police officer who retired and then basically became a private investigator. In the very first book, he also ends up inheriting a baby elephant who accompanies him while he is investigating crimes and who seems super adorable. So like I said, this is the fourth book in the series, and in this one you are following Inspector Chopra as he gets hired to investigate a death that happens at the Grand Raj Palace Hotel, which is this really extravagant, luxurious hotel in Mumbai. It's where all of the celebrities and everyone stays when they're in Mumbai. There was an art auction that had taken place the day before this death occurred, and the man who died was this American billionaire who paid around $10 million for this painting from an Indian artist, and it's like the highest amount that like anyone has paid for a piece of art from an Indian artist or something along those lines. And then the next morning he is found dead in his bed with a knife in his chest. So in the beginning the authorities are basically ready to rule this as a suicide. However, Inspector Chopra gets hired to investigate this further, and obviously not everything is as it seems. So I really enjoyed the series a lot. I have enjoyed them from the beginning. I've read all of them at this point except for the third book. I had skipped ahead to this book because we were doing an episode on locked room mysteries for Read or Dead, which is the mystery thriller podcast that I co-host for Book Riot. Linked down in the description in case you're interested. And so I thought I would pick up this one because I had read like that description, and so I thought it was going to be a locked room mystery, but it didn't really turn into a locked room mystery. But I'm really glad I read it anyways because I think this is my favorite out of the series. One of my favorite things about this is that Inspector Chopra's wife, Poppy, basically gets her own side mystery that she gets to investigate, which I also found to be really fun. Also, one of the details in here is based on like a real event, which the author briefly mentions at the end of the book, which is another like sort of thing that ties it all up together. But I think that this is like a mystery series that finds that balance for me of like being a fun mystery and kind of like a delightful read without being too dark or gritty, but it doesn't lean too far into the saccharine either. So if you're someone who maybe hasn't tried cozy mysteries before but you're kind of intrigued by them, I definitely recommend this series. And like I said, I think this is the strongest one out of the three that I've read so far, and I definitely need to go back and pick up number 3 for myself. So yeah, I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. So my favorite mystery that I read this week is The Janes by Louisa Luna. This is the sequel to Two Girls Down, which I read when it came out a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed that book. I think I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and this series you are following the private investigator named Alice Vega. In the first book, you are following two girls who have gone missing, and Alice Vega ends up joining up with this retired police officer named Max Kaplan. My original feelings towards that mystery was that I really enjoyed it mostly because of Alice and Cap. I thought that their like chemistry and friendship and their like sort of getting to know each other was really strong. Cap gave me very strong Keith Mars vibes, which is a thing that I appreciate. Keith Mars referring to Veronica Mars for those of you who aren't aware. And so like kind of imagining that character in my head for Max Kaplan really just like sort of upped my enjoyment of that book. This, like I said, is the sequel, but it's like one of those sequels where you don't necessarily need to read the first book in order to read this one, but they do like make references to things, and I think it's better if you do read them in order, so that way you kind of understand where the characters are at in their lives. So this story takes place in San Diego, and there are these two Jane Does who end up showing up in the coroner. They are both underage. I think it's like their ages are like 12 and 14 or something like that. And the coroner believes that the two deaths are related because they are both of Mexican descent and they both have IUDs inserted into them. And the IUD serial numbers are really close to each other, leading the coroner to believe that like someone stole a bunch of IUDs and, you know, inserted them into these girls. And so they think it's some sort of like human trafficking situation. So Alice Vega gets hired by the San Diego Police Department, and the DEA is also involved in all of this because they also think that they're people who are running this human trafficking ring are also smuggling drugs into the country. But Alice Vega basically gets hired under the table. She's paid completely in cash, which, is a little bit shady. And she also tells these investigators that she's only going to work this job if she gets to hire an outside consultant, and that outside consultant is Max Kaplan. So Max Kaplan flies out to San Diego. He lives on the East Coast, and together they start looking into these crimes. And yeah, this book was really great. It kind of like goes the way you think it's going to go in the beginning. It's really fun, it's fast paced, but for me personally at least, like there's sort of like an expected ending for this book, and that expected ending happened way sooner than I thought it was going to. And it's because there was a whole nother layer and mystery added on top of this story that I wasn't prepared for and wasn't expecting, and I was so like surprised in the best possible way for that sort of plot twist. It's not really a plot twist because it wasn't like some major reveal or something like that, but it just made you realize that, oh, this actually goes a lot farther than you think it's supposed to go. There are a lot of new characters in here that I really enjoyed, specifically like the coroner and things like that. They give her a lot of really great personality. I think that the mystery in this book is significantly stronger than it is in the first book. The first one was a lot more like of a slow burn. This one is definitely more fast paced, which, depending on your preferences, you will enjoy one more than the other. I will say that the sort of chemistry between Cap and Vega felt different in this book, and I don't know if it was a good different or bad different because again it kind of depends on your preferences. I felt like everything was slightly more overt in this book compared to the first book, but that just might be me. But I still really enjoyed this a lot, and I think that this is a super underrated series. So if you are someone who enjoys mystery series at all, I definitely recommend these books. Again, the first book is called Two Girls Down, and this one, The Janes, is also really good. So also if you read Two Girls Down when it came out, I definitely recommend picking this one up. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and it's probably one of my favorite mysteries I've read so far this year. And the final book that I read was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is one of those books that I've heard really good things about from like a lot of different people, like people at Book Riot, people here on BookTube. And this was a young adult mystery series that was originally published in the UK and then eventually came over here to the US. So I was on hold for this one through my local library, like for an ebook of it for a while. So in this book, you are following this girl named Pippa who is in her final year of high school, and for her sort of like final project, capstone project sort of thing, she decides that she is going to look into this sort of unsolved crime that took place in her town and with like some kids who were a little bit older than her. So about 5 years ago, this girl named Andy ends up going missing and eventually like declared dead, even though her body is never found. And her boyfriend at the time, Sal Singh, is accused of the murder, and his body is found dead like a couple of days, I think, after Andy's body is found, and his death is ruled a suicide because he took a bunch of pills and had like a plastic bag over his head and suffocated to death. And after Sal died, everyone basically just declared that Sal was the one who killed Andy and would have been found guilty had, he not taken his own life and stuff like that. He also sent like a text message to his dad saying that he did it and stuff like that. So now it's 5 years later, and Pippa has decided that for her capstone project, she's going to write about all of these events that occurred. But what she's actually trying to do is see whether or not, one, if Andy is still alive, and two, if she is dead, who killed her, because she doesn't believe that Sal actually did it. So like I said at the beginning, I have heard nothing but really good things about this book, and for me personally, like this was a really strong mystery book, but it's not necessarily like my favorite mystery book. Like to me, it's like a 3.5 star book. I think it's a really good young adult mystery, and I think it's a really good sort of like intro to mystery books, depending on your tastes, especially if you're someone who reads a lot of young adult books. But there were like certain things that, as someone who reads a lot of mysteries, I was just like rolled my eyes at a little bit. But one thing that is not the fault of the book, I would say necessarily, is that they changed a lot of things from the UK edition. From what I could tell, they changed the setting to be in the United States as opposed to in the UK in the US edition, which I think is like super dumb, first of all. But I feel like because they did that, some of the writing and the descriptions and the choices that the characters make feel a little bit like clunky and uncomfortable because they kind of like are trying to find the closest American equivalent for certain things, and it just really comes down to they should have just left it in the UK. Believe it or not, teenagers know what England is. Another thing about this book that like kind of bothered me is that like everything happens really like easily. Like all of the facts are found pretty quickly. Every time Pippa has a hunch of like looking into this certain thing, she finds what she's looking for pretty fast. And again, this might be just the point of like it being a young adult book, but it's just for me personally as someone who reads a lot of mystery books, it all just felt like super easy and super simple, and it all came super fast for Pippa. There are also like situations that Pippa gets herself into that like she just happens to work out perfectly in her favor for the most part. For example, there is one point where she goes to a local drug dealer's house and just like straight up knocks on the door and starts like asking him questions about this murder that happened 5 years ago, and this drug dealer just knows all of the answers to all of her questions, and then like she gets off like relatively scot-free from this whole situation. And I read that whole scene and I was like, what? Like, in what world does like a 17-18-year-old girl go knocking on doors of drug dealers and just demands answers out of them and gets them? And there were like a couple of situations like that where I was reading it and I was like, that all just worked out way too well. Also, everyone seems to remember a lot of details about this event that occurred 5 years ago, which I realized it's also like a traumatic event, and like those types of things will stick in your head a little bit, but it just felt really weird that everyone remembered everything so well. But all of that being said, I did enjoy this book pretty well. It's a really fast read and it's a really engaging read. You can definitely tell that Holly Jackson like planned out this mystery really well, because there are like details that are like not thrown in, but like sprinkled in throughout the story that like lead you towards where it all goes. I'm not going to obviously go into the ending or anything like that, but it's definitely like a well woven rug, so to speak, of a mystery. So I really enjoyed it for that aspect, and I definitely didn't like see any of the stuff at the end coming. It also gave me like a little bit of Veronica Mars vibes, so if you are someone who likes that sort of like darker teen detective stuff, I think that this book will appeal to you as well. So yeah, I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It's probably closer to a 3.5 for me. But again, I think that's because I read a lot of mystery books, so my standard is like a little bit different than most people's. But I think that this is like a really fun, enjoyable read, kind of like that perfect summertime fit if you are looking for something like that. I think that there's more books coming out like in this world from this author, so I will definitely check those out once they come over to the United States. So that is everything I have for this week. Let me know down in the comments below what you all have been reading this week, if there's been anything particularly good in your stack, or if you've read any of these books. Of course, you're always welcome to talk to me about them down in the comment section below. I don't really have an update of what I'm currently reading because I like just finished A Good Girl's Guide to Murder last night, and so I haven't figured out what I'm reading next, besides, continuing on with the Frederick Douglass biography. I do only have one more book left in the BookTube Prize reading, so I'm definitely going to get to that this weekend and figure out how I'm ranking these books, because I have a lot of like similar thoughts on a lot of these books, and so I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to rank them yet, but I suppose I need to like finish the last book, and maybe that'll give me a little bit more clarity on what I'm going to do. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.